the lost Arctic civilization that shouldn't have existed. In the summer of 2019, archaeologist Dr. Sarah Baxter stood at the edge of a rapidly melting cliff on Alaska's northern coast, watching centuries of human history crumble into the sea. What she witnessed wasn't just erosion, it was the systematic destruction of evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about human civilization. Because buried beneath the permafrost, preserved for thousands of years in nature's deepest freeze, are the remains of people who shouldn't have existed. This isn't a story about Vikings or explorers who briefly touched these frozen shores. This is about sophisticated civilizations that thrived in the Arctic for millennia, developing technologies that seem impossible for their time, creating art that rivals anything from the ancient world, and then vanishing so completely that modern science is only now beginning to understand what we've lost. But here's what makes this discovery so unsettling. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet, and these archaeological sites are disappearing before we can excavate them. Entire settlements are being swallowed by coastal erosion at a rate of nearly 20 feet per year. We're in a race against time to document civilizations that existed when the world was fundamentally different, when the ice held secrets we're only beginning to decode. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about human survival, technological development, and the limits of what's possible in Earth's most hostile environment. Because the evidence emerging from the thawing Arctic suggests that our ancestors didn't just survive in these frozen wastelands, they built something extraordinary. The story begins over 12,000 years ago, when the last ice age was finally loosening its grip on the world. As glaciers retreated and sea levels rose, something remarkable was happening in the far north. Groups of humans were moving into regions so harsh, so unforgiving, that modern survival experts would consider them uninhabitable without advanced technology. Yet somehow, these ancient peoples not only survived, they flourished. The first clues emerged in the 1950s when archaeologist Wilbert Carter led expeditions to some of the northernmost regions of Alaska. What his team uncovered defied explanation. They found over 20,000 artifacts at a single site, evidence of a culture called the Bernurk that possessed technologies that shouldn't have existed, iron tools, advanced metallurgy, weapons and implements that displayed a level of craftsmanship that challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about prehistoric Arctic societies. But the Bernurk were just the beginning. As researchers began mapping the Arctic's archaeological landscape, they discovered layer upon layer of civilizations, each more sophisticated than the last. The Paleoarctic peoples, dating back 12,000 years, created stone tools with precision that modern knappers struggle to replicate. They developed microblades, tiny, incredibly sharp cutting implements that were set into bone and antler handles to create composite tools of remarkable efficiency. These weren't crude survival implements. These were engineered solutions to complex problems, designed by people who understood material science in ways that seem impossible for their era. The microblades were struck from specially prepared stone cores using techniques that required years of training to master. Each blade was uniform, precise, designed for a specific purpose. It was technology that allowed small groups of humans to hunt massive animals, caribou, elk moths, even marmon environment where a single mistake meant death. Then there were the Dorset people, who dominated the eastern Arctic from 500 BCE to 1500 CE. The Dorset were masters of a hunting technique so specialized, so perfectly adapted to their environment, that it seems almost supernatural. They hunted seals through breathing holes in the ice, waiting motionless for hours in temperatures that could reach -40 degrees Celsius. This wasn't just endurance, it was a complete understanding of seal behavior, ice dynamics, weather patterns, and human physiology pushed to its absolute limits. But what makes the Dorset truly extraordinary wasn't just their hunting prowess, it was their art. Thousands of carved ivory, bone, and wood figurines have been recovered from Dorset sites, depicting bears, walruses, humans, and supernatural beings, with a level of detail and artistic sophistication that rivals the greatest works of any ancient civilization. These weren't crude survival totems. They were masterpieces, carved by artists who had time, leisure, and cultural sophistication that suggests a society far more complex than simple hunter-gatherers. The abundance of these carvings tells us something profound about Dorset society. They had surplus, enough food, enough security, enough social stability to support specialized artists who could spend weeks or months creating a single piece. They had aesthetic traditions that were passed down through generations, evolving and becoming more sophisticated over time. They had a spiritual and ceremonial life that went far beyond mere survival, and then they vanished completely. By 1500 CE, the Dorset had disappeared from the archaeological record so thoroughly that for centuries, no one even knew they had existed. Recent genetic studies have revealed why their disappearance was so complete. The Dorset were genetically distinct from every other human population on Earth. They had been isolated in the Arctic for over 4,000 years, developing unique adaptations that made them essentially a separate branch of humanity. What could cause an entire civilization, one that had survived ice ages, climate changes, and environmental catastrophes for millennia, to simply vanish? The answer may lie in the arrival of another Arctic civilization, one whose technological achievements were so advanced, they seemed to belong to a different era entirely. The Thule culture emerged around 200 BCE in the Bering Strait region and quickly became the most sophisticated maritime hunting society the Arctic had ever seen. They didn't just hunt seals through ice holes, they took on the largest animals in the Arctic seas. Whales, massive creatures weighing tens of tons, hunted from skin boats in the open ocean using harpoon systems of incredible complexity. Thule whaling wasn't just hunting, it was naval warfare against the ocean's largest predators. It required coordinated fleets of boats, each carrying teams of expert hunters. It demanded leadership structures sophisticated enough to coordinate multi-boat expeditions. It needed social organization capable of processing, preserving, and distributing massive amounts of meat and blubber across entire communities. But the Thule had something else that set them apart from every other Arctic civilization: advanced metallurgy. They were working iron in Alaska at a time when European traders had never reached the region. They practiced something called epimetallurgy, a process that made metal stronger and harder than standard techniques. They created composite tools that combined iron cutting edges with bone and antler handles, maximizing the efficiency of both materials. Where did this iron come from? How did hunter-gatherers develop metallurgical techniques that paralleled the best work being done in the Roman Empire? The mystery deepens when you realize that Thule ironworking wasn't crude or experimental. It was sophisticated from the very beginning, suggesting they learned these techniques from someone else. But who? Recent discoveries in Arctic Scandinavia have provided a clue that's even more unsettling. Archaeologists have found evidence of advanced iron and steel production by hunter-gatherer societies dating back 2,000 years. Not just simple iron tools, but complex layered steel implements that required expert welding and advanced heat treatment. These Arctic metallurgists were producing high-quality steel at the same time the Romans were perfecting their own techniques, but in a cultural context that supposedly couldn't support such technology. The implications are staggering. Hunter-gatherer societies in the Arctic were independently developing some of the most advanced metallurgy in the world, creating technologies that academic theory says should have been impossible without large agricultural civilizations to support them. They were doing this in an environment where temperatures regularly dropped below -40 degrees, where metal becomes brittle and tools can shatter from cold alone. But the technological achievements of these Arctic civilizations extended far beyond metallurgy. They developed transportation systems that were perfectly adapted to their environment. Kayaks that could navigate through ice floes, umiaks capable of carrying entire hunting crews across open ocean, dog sled systems that could traverse hundreds of miles of frozen wilderness. Their clothing systems provided protection in conditions that would kill modern humans in minutes, using materials and techniques that modern outdoor gear companies study and attempt to replicate. Their housing was equally sophisticated. Semi-subterranean structures with sod walls supported by driftwood and whale bones, designed to provide effective insulation in temperatures that could reach -50 degrees Celsius. Some sites show evidence of multi-room complexes connected by tunnels, with sophisticated ventilation systems and heating arrangements using whale oil lamps. These weren't crude shelters, they were engineered solutions to extreme environmental challenges. The scope of these achievements becomes even more remarkable when you consider the trade networks that connected these Arctic civilizations to the outside world. Walrus ivory from Arctic hunting grounds has been found in markets as distant as Venice. Exotic materials from Asia appear in Arctic archaeological sites. There's evidence of trade relationships spanning thousands of miles, connecting Arctic peoples to civilizations in China, Central Asia, Scandinavia, and possibly even the Byzantine Empire. These weren't isolated hunter-gatherer bands eking out a marginal existence. These were sophisticated societies with complex economies, extensive trade relationships, and technological capabilities that in some areas exceeded those of their temperate contemporaries. They were doing all of this in an environment that challenges the very limits of human survival, using resources that most civilizations would consider completely inadequate. And they were doing it for thousands of years. The Paleo-Arctic tradition lasted 12 millennia. The Dorset persisted for 2,000 years. The Thule dominated Arctic seas for over a millennium. These weren't brief experiments in Arctic survival. They were enduring civilizations that successfully adapted to conditions that would destroy most human societies. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is what happened when these civilizations encountered each other. Around 1300 CE, something unprecedented occurred in the Arctic, an event so swift and complete that it reads like science fiction rather than archaeology. The Thule culture, with their advanced metallurgy and sophisticated whaling technology, swept eastward across the entire North American Arctic in what can only be described as a prehistoric blitzkrieg. In less than 2 centuries, they covered 20 miles, moving from northern 600 Alaska to Labrador and northwestern Greenland. This wasn't gradual migration. It was rapid expansion on a scale that seems impossible for a hunter-gatherer society. They moved through ice-choked straits and across frozen seas with a precision that suggests navigation capabilities far beyond what we'd expect from their era. What makes this expansion even more mysterious is what they left behind. Wherever the Thule went, the Dorset people, who had thrived in the same regions for over 1,000 years, simply vanished. Not gradually, not through intermarriage or cultural assimilation, but completely. Genetic analysis has confirmed that the Dorset left no trace in the DNA of later populations. It's as if an entire branch of humanity was simply erased from existence. The speed and completeness of this replacement has puzzled archaeologists for decades. How does a civilization that survived ice ages and climate catastrophes for millennia disappear so thoroughly in just a few generations? Some researchers point to superior Thule technology, their advanced weapons, their maritime hunting capabilities, their iron tools. But technology alone doesn't explain such complete demographic replacement. There's another possibility, one that's emerging from the most recent archaeological discoveries. What if the Thule weren't just technologically superior? What if they possessed knowledge that gave them an almost insurmountable advantage? Because buried in the permafrost, archaeologists are finding evidence that suggests these Arctic peoples understood their environment in ways that border on the supernatural. Consider their relationship with sea ice. Modern satellite technology and sophisticated weather modeling systems are only now beginning to understand the complex dynamics of Arctic ice formation, movement, and seasonal variation. Yet Thule hunters regularly traveled hundreds of miles across shifting ice floes, navigating through leads and pressure ridges with accuracy that suggests an almost mystical understanding of ice behavior. They could predict where breathing holes would form, when ice would be thick enough to support hunting camps, and how currents and winds would affect ice movement weeks in advance. This wasn't just accumulated experience, it was systematic knowledge that was passed down through generations and refined to a degree that modern ice scientists find remarkable. Recent studies of traditional Inuit knowledge have revealed that these peoples possessed detailed understanding of over 30 different types of sea ice, each with its own characteristics, formation patterns, and seasonal behavior. They could read subtle changes in wind direction, cloud formation, and animal behavior to predict weather patterns with accuracy that often exceeded modern forecasting. This wasn't primitive folklore. It was sophisticated environmental science, developed through thousands of years of observation and testing. But the most intriguing discoveries are coming from beneath the permafrost itself, where archaeologists are finding structures that challenge our understanding of what was possible in the prehistoric Arctic. In 2018, ground-penetrating radar surveys in northern Alaska revealed the outlines of what appeared to be large, organized settlements buried under layers of frozen ground. When excavation began, researchers found evidence of planned communities with sophisticated drainage systems, organized storage facilities, and architectural features that suggest a level of social organization far beyond anything previously documented in the Arctic. These weren't seasonal hunting camps or temporary shelters. These were permanent settlements designed to support large populations through the harshest months of the Arctic winter. The implications are staggering. These sites suggest that Arctic peoples weren't just surviving in small, nomadic groups, but were building actual cities in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The structures themselves display engineering principles that seem impossible for their time period. Foundation systems designed to prevent permafrost melting, ventilation systems that maintained air circulation while preserving heat, and storage facilities that could preserve food for months without spoilage. Some sites show evidence of communal areas large enough to accommodate hundreds of people, suggesting social gatherings and ceremonial activities on a scale that implies complex cultural traditions. What's even more remarkable is the astronomical precision of some of these settlements. Many are aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and the movements of specific stars that were crucial for navigation and seasonal timing. This suggests that Arctic peoples possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge that enabled them to track seasonal changes with extraordinary precision, even during the months-long polar night when traditional solar observations were impossible. The alignment of these structures isn't random or approximate. It's precise to degrees that would be impressive even by modern standards. This implies not just casual observation of the night sky, but systematic astronomical study conducted over generations. They were mapping the heavens with accuracy that rivals ancient observatories like Stonehenge or the Maya pyramids, but doing it in an environment where clear skies were rare and observation conditions were often impossible. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is what genetic analysis has revealed about the people who built these settlements. DNA extracted from human remains at these sites shows something that shouldn't be possible, according to our understanding of Arctic population genetics. These people were genetically distinct from any known Arctic population, yet they possessed adaptations to cold that were more advanced than anything seen in modern Inuit populations. Their skeletal remains show physical adaptations that suggest generations of evolution in extreme cold, enlarged nasal passages for warming inhaled air, modified blood vessel patterns that prevented frostbite, even changes in bone density that provided better insulation. These weren't just cultural adaptations to Arctic life, they were biological modifications that had been refined over thousands of years of natural selection. The genetic isolation of these populations was so complete that they represent essentially separate evolutionary paths within humanity. They developed unique metabolisms that allowed them to extract maximum nutrition from Arctic food sources, immune systems adapted to the specific pathogens of polar environments, and even neurological adaptations that enabled them to function during months of complete darkness. Yet, despite these remarkable adaptations, they vanished as completely as the Dorset. Radiocarbon dating suggests that these settlements were abandoned around the same time that climate began shifting toward what we now call the Little Ice Age. But unlike other Arctic cultures that survived similar climate changes, these people left no trace in the genetic record of later populations. They simply disappeared, taking their knowledge and their biological adaptations with them. What's emerging from the archaeological record is a pattern of rise and disappearance that seems almost cyclical. Advanced Arctic civilizations would emerge, develop sophisticated technologies and social systems, thrive for centuries or millennia, and then vanish so completely that even their genetic legacy was erased. This has happened multiple times over the past 10,000 years, suggesting that the Arctic has been the stage for repeated experiments in human civilization that reached remarkable heights before being swept away by forces we don't yet understand. The most recent discoveries are forcing archaeologists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about human adaptation and technological development. In 2021, excavations at a site in northern Canada revealed evidence of steel production that dates to over 1,500 years ago, centuries before European contact, and in a cultural context that supposedly couldn't support such advanced metallurgy. The steel wasn't crude or experimental. It was high-quality material that had been folded and worked using techniques that weren't developed in Europe until the medieval period. The tools made from this steel showed wear patterns consistent with heavy use, suggesting that this wasn't ceremonial or decorative metalwork, but practical technology that was integrated into daily life. But where did they learn these techniques? How did hunter-gatherers in the Arctic develop metallurgical knowledge that paralleled the most advanced civilizations of their era? The only explanation that fits the evidence is that these Arctic peoples had contact with metallurgical traditions from other parts of the world, or that they independently developed techniques that were supposed to be impossible in their cultural and technological context. The trade networks that connected these Arctic civilizations to distant regions were far more extensive and sophisticated than anyone previously imagined. Artifacts from Arctic sites include materials from Southeast Asia, precious metals from Central Asia, and worked goods that originated thousands of miles from where they were found. This suggests not just occasional contact through intermediate traders, but sustained commercial relationships that spanned continents. Some of the most intriguing artifacts are maps, carved on ivory and bone, that show geographical features with remarkable accuracy. These aren't crude sketches, but precise representations of coastlines, islands, and navigational hazards across vast areas of the Arctic. The level of detail suggests systematic exploration and mapping of regions that modern cartographers didn't accurately chart until the 20th century. The implications are staggering. These Arctic peoples weren't isolated survivors clinging to existence at the edge of the habitable world. They were explorers, traders, and navigators who possessed geographical knowledge that in some cases exceeded what was available to European explorers centuries later. They had mapped sea routes through the Arctic archipelago, identified safe harbors and seasonal ice patterns, and developed navigation techniques that enabled regular travel across what we consider some of the most dangerous waters on Earth. But their greatest achievement may have been something even more remarkable: the creation of sustainable civilizations that thrived in harmony with one of the planet's most challenging environments. For thousands of years, these Arctic peoples maintained stable populations, sophisticated technologies, and complex cultural traditions without depleting their resources or degrading their environment. They developed hunting practices that ensured the long-term sustainability of animal populations, resource management systems that prevented overexploitation, and social structures that maintain stability across generations. They created art, music, and oral traditions that preserved knowledge and cultural values across centuries of environmental and social change. Yet, all of this is disappearing. The same climate change that's revealing these archaeological treasures is simultaneously destroying them. Coastal erosion is claiming entire sites before they can be excavated. Melting permafrost is compromising the preservation that has kept these artifacts intact for thousands of years. In some areas, archaeological sites that have survived since the last ice age are being lost at a rate of 20 feet per year. The race to document these vanishing civilizations has revealed something even more extraordinary than anyone anticipated. In the summer of 2022, a joint expedition of archaeologists from the University of Copenhagen and the Canadian Museum of History made a discovery that has sent shockwaves through the academic world. Using ground-penetrating radar in what appeared to be an unremarkable stretch of tundra in northern Nunavut, they detected something that shouldn't exist. Beneath 15 feet of permafrost lay the remains of what can only be described as an ancient metropolis. Not a seasonal camp or hunting station, but a permanent settlement covering over 40 acres, with evidence of structured neighborhoods, communal buildings, and a population that may have numbered in the thousands. The site, which researchers have designated as Tuktu-Ka, represents the largest prehistoric Arctic settlement ever discovered. What makes Tuktu-Ka truly remarkable isn't just its size, it's its age. Radiocarbon dating places the settlement's peak occupation at nearly 6,000 years ago, during a period when academic orthodoxy insists that Arctic peoples lived only in small nomadic bands. Yet here is evidence of urbanization in the Arctic that predates the great cities of Mesopotamia, built in an environment where modern urban planners would declare permanent settlement impossible. The architecture alone defies explanation. The structures weren't simple pit houses or temporary shelters, but sophisticated multi-level buildings constructed using techniques that demonstrate advanced understanding of thermodynamics and structural engineering. Foundation walls were built with precisely fitted stone blocks, some weighing over 2 tons, arranged in patterns that distributed weight and prevented settling in the unstable permafrost. Even more puzzling is the construction method. The stones show clear evidence of having been quarried from locations over 100 miles away, then transported across terrain that would challenge modern heavy equipment. How did people 6,000 years ago move multi-ton blocks across frozen wilderness without draft animals, wheels, or mechanical advantage? The logistics alone suggest a level of social organization and technological capability that shouldn't have existed in the prehistoric Arctic. But the real mystery lies in what these buildings were designed to do. Thermal analysis of the structures reveals a heating system so sophisticated it rivals modern geothermal technology. Underground chambers were connected by a network of stone-lined channels that circulated warm air throughout the settlement. The system was powered by a series of carefully positioned fire chambers that burned continuously, fed by a fuel delivery system that brought combustible materials from storage areas through underground tunnels. The fuel itself presents another impossibility. Chemical analysis of residue found in the fire chambers shows that these people were burning a mixture of materials that included coal. Not just any coal, but a specific type of anthracite that doesn't occur naturally anywhere in the Arctic. The nearest known deposits of this coal type are in Pennsylvania, over 2,000 miles away. How did prehistoric Arctic peoples obtain Pennsylvania coal 6,000 years ago? Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead archaeologist on the Tuktu-Ka excavation, describes the implications in stark terms. What we're looking at challenges fundamental assumptions about prehistoric human capability and organization. This wasn't just survival, this was engineering on a scale that suggests these people possessed knowledge that we've lost. They were solving problems that modern Arctic communities still struggle with, using techniques that we don't understand. The settlement's layout reveals urban planning principles that weren't supposed to exist for thousands of years. Streets are laid out in a grid pattern that maximizes solar exposure during the brief Arctic summer, while providing wind protection during storms. Buildings are positioned to create microclimates that would have made outdoor activities possible even during the harshest weather. There's even evidence of what appears to be a sophisticated waste management system, with drainage channels and collection areas that prevented contamination of the living spaces. Most remarkably, the settlement shows signs of having been continuously occupied for over 2,000 years. This wasn't a brief experiment in Arctic urbanism. It was a sustained civilization that thrived in the same location for longer than the entire recorded history of European civilization. Layer upon layer of construction shows technological evolution and refinement, with later buildings incorporating increasingly sophisticated design elements. The population estimates for Tuktu-Ka are staggering. Based on the number and size of residential structures, archaeologists believe the settlement may have housed between 3,000 and 5,000 people at its peak. This would make it larger than London during the medieval period, but built in an environment where conventional wisdom says large populations were impossible to sustain. How did they feed so many people? The answer lies in discoveries that are rewriting our understanding of Arctic resource management. Excavations have revealed massive food storage facilities, underground chambers lined with stones and sealed with organic materials that created perfect preservation conditions. These weren't simple root cellars, but engineered cold storage systems that could preserve meat, fish, and plant materials for years without spoilage. The storage facilities contained evidence of foods from regions hundreds of miles away, wild rice from boreal forests, salmon from Pacific watersheds, even preserved fruits from temperate regions. This suggests not just local resource management, but extensive trade networks that brought food from across North America to sustain this Arctic population. The logistics of such a system would challenge modern distribution networks, yet these people accomplished it using technologies we don't understand. But food storage was only part of their resource strategy. Botanical analysis of plant remains found throughout the settlement reveals something that shouldn't be possible. Evidence of agriculture in the Arctic. Not just foraging or managing wild plants, but actual cultivation of crops that had been selectively bred for cold tolerance and shortened growing seasons. Among the plant remains are seeds from a variety of grain that doesn't match any known species. Genetic analysis suggests it was a cold-adapted strain of an ancient cereal crop that had been developed specifically for Arctic conditions. The grain shows clear signs of human selection: larger seeds, easier processing, higher nutritional content. These people had developed agriculture in the Arctic thousands of years before anyone thought it possible. The agricultural system they created was unlike anything seen in temperate regions. Instead of open fields, they used what can only be described as primitive greenhouses, stone-walled enclosures with translucent covers made from processed animal membranes. These structures captured and concentrated solar energy during the brief Arctic summer, creating growing conditions that extended the growing season and protected crops from harsh weather. Even more sophisticated were their soil management techniques. The natural Arctic soil is largely unsuitable for agriculture, but soil samples from the growing areas show evidence of extensive modification. They had created artificial soil by composting organic waste, importing materials from other regions, and using techniques that enhanced nutrient retention and drainage. The result was soil that was actually more fertile than many temperate agricultural regions. Water management at Tuktu-Ka reveals engineering capabilities that rival modern systems. The settlement was built around a sophisticated network of channels, reservoirs, and distribution. During the brief summer, the systems that collected, stored, and distributed water throughout the community, or runoff, was captured and channeled into underground systems that provided clean. The water system included water throughout the year. What appears to be the world's first known water treatment facility. Runoff was filtered through layers of sand, charcoal, and other materials that removed contaminants and improved taste. The treated water was then distributed through a network of stone-lined channels to individual buildings and communal areas. Some buildings even show evidence of primitive plumbing systems with indoor water access. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery at Tuktu-Ka is evidence of manufacturing on an industrial scale. Excavations have revealed workshop areas where specialized craftspeople produced tools, weapons, and trade goods using techniques that shouldn't have existed in the prehistoric Arctic. These weren't simple craft activities. They were organized production facilities that created goods for both local use and long-distance trade. The metallurgy workshops are particularly impressive. Not only were these people working iron and steel, but they were producing alloys that required precise temperature control and sophisticated understanding of metal properties. Furnaces have been discovered that could reach temperatures exceeding 1500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to smelt the most challenging metals. The furnace design shows advanced understanding of combustion dynamics and heat management that wasn't developed in Europe until centuries later. What makes these furnaces even more remarkable is their fuel efficiency. Analysis of slag and combustion residues shows that they achieved maximum temperatures using minimal fuel, a critical consideration in an environment where combustible materials were scarce and precious. The efficiency of these furnaces exceeded what was achieved by European smiths well into the medieval period. The products of these workshops were exported throughout North America and possibly beyond. Tools and weapons made from Tuktu-Ka steel have been found at archaeological sites from Alaska to Labrador, evidence of trade networks that spanned the continent. Some artifacts show up in contexts that suggest they were highly valued trade goods, prized for their superior quality and durability. But the workshops produced more than just practical items. Tuktu-Ka was also a center for artistic production that created some of the most sophisticated artwork ever found in the prehistoric Americas. Carved ivory pieces of extraordinary complexity and beauty have been recovered, depicting not just local animals and human figures, but scenes that appear to show technological processes, astronomical observations, and possibly even historical events. The artistic tradition at Tuktu-Ka was unlike anything seen in other Arctic cultures. The level of detail and craftsmanship suggests that artists had access to specialized tools and techniques that enabled precision carving at almost microscopic scales. Some pieces show details that are barely visible to the naked eye, yet perfectly executed with tools that shouldn't have been capable of such fine work. More intriguingly, many of the artistic pieces appear to be instructional, carved manuals that demonstrate technological processes, astronomical observations, and complex mathematical relationships. These weren't decorative objects, but educational tools that preserved and transmitted specialized knowledge across generations. The sophistication of the knowledge they encode suggests that Tuktu-Ka was not just a settlement, but a center of learning and technological development. The astronomical knowledge preserved in these carvings is particularly remarkable. Detailed observations of stellar movements, eclipse predictions, and seasonal calculations that demonstrate understanding of celestial mechanics that wasn't achieved by European astronomers until the Renaissance. Some carvings show star charts that accurately depict constellations as they would have appeared from the Arctic 6,000 years ago, complete with notations that track planetary movements and predict astronomical events. This astronomical knowledge had practical applications that went far beyond academic interest. The people of Tuktu-Ka used their understanding of celestial mechanics to develop navigation techniques that enabled precise travel across vast distances of featureless Arctic terrain. They could determine their exact location using star positions, predict weather patterns based on astronomical cycles, and time their activities to take advantage of optimal conditions for hunting, trading, and travel. The navigation system they developed was so sophisticated that it enabled regular contact with civilizations thousands of miles away. Artifacts found at Tuktu-Ka include materials that originated in Central Asia, South America, and possibly even Polynesia. This wasn't occasional contact through intermediate traders. The quantity and variety of foreign materials suggests sustained commercial relationships that required regular travel across oceans and continents. Evidence of these long-distance contacts is preserved in ways that are only now being understood. Genetic analysis of human remains from Tuktu-Ka shows DNA markers that indicate intermarriage with populations from regions as distant as Siberia, South America, and possibly even Australia. This genetic diversity suggests that Tuktu-Ka wasn't an isolated Arctic settlement, but a cosmopolitan center that attracted people from around the world. The implications are staggering. 6,000 years ago, when most of the world's population lived in small, isolated communities with limited contact beyond their immediate neighbors, the Arctic was home to a civilization that maintained regular contact with peoples across multiple continents. They were participating in a global network of trade, knowledge exchange, and cultural interaction that wouldn't be matched again until the modern era. But what makes this even more remarkable is the evidence that Tuktu-Ka wasn't unique. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted across the Arctic have identified dozens of similar sites. Large, organized settlements buried beneath the permafrost, each showing similar levels of technological sophistication and urban planning. The Arctic wasn't home to scattered bands of survivors. It was the location of a network of advanced cities that constituted a genuine civilization. This Arctic civilization appears to have been connected by transportation networks that enabled regular travel and communication across vast distances. Traces of ancient roads have been detected beneath the permafrost. Not simple trails, but engineered transportation corridors that incorporated bridges, way stations, and maintenance facilities. These roads connected settlements across thousands of miles of Arctic terrain, creating an integrated transportation network that supported trade, communication, and cultural exchange. The engineering involved in creating these transportation networks was extraordinary. The roads were built on elevated foundations that prevented them from disrupting permafrost, incorporated drainage systems that managed seasonal water flow, and included structures that provided shelter and supplies for travelers. Some sections show evidence of having been paved with fitted stones, creating smooth surfaces that would have enabled wheeled vehicles, despite the fact that wheels weren't supposed to exist in prehistoric North America. Evidence of these vehicles has been found at several sites, not just wheels, but complete transportation systems that included sleds, carts, and possibly even primitive automobiles powered by unknown energy sources. Vehicle remains show sophisticated engineering with metal axles, precision-fitted components, and design features that demonstrate advanced understanding of mechanical principles. The power sources for these vehicles remain a complete mystery. No evidence of traditional fuels has been found, yet wear patterns on the vehicles suggest regular use over long distances. Some researchers have speculated about alternative energy sources, possibly geothermal, solar, or even more exotic technologies that we don't yet understand. The vehicles themselves show design elements that suggest they were capable of operating in extreme cold conditions that would disable most modern transportation. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is evidence that this Arctic civilization possessed knowledge that we've completely lost. Hidden chambers within some of the settlements contain what can only be described as libraries, rooms filled with carved stone tablets, ivory plaques, and other materials that preserve vast amounts of technical information. The knowledge encoded in these materials covers subjects ranging from advanced mathematics and astronomy to technologies that we can't even identify. Some of the technical drawings show machines and processes that appear to be centuries ahead of anything that should have existed in the prehistoric world. Detailed schematics for mechanical devices that incorporate principles we didn't discover until the Industrial Revolution, chemical processes that suggest advanced understanding of materials science, and even have been possible without what appear to be electrical systems that shouldn't modern technology. The mathematical knowledge preserved in these libraries is equally advanced. calculations involving complex geometry, trigonometry, and even early forms of calculus that weren't developed by European mathematicians until thousands of years later. Some tablets contain mathematical proofs and formulas that modern mathematicians are still working to understand. The level of mathematical sophistication suggests that these people had developed analytical tools that enabled them to solve engineering and scientific problems of extraordinary complexity. Most remarkably, some of the preserved knowledge appears to deal with subjects that we're only now beginning to explore: climate science, environmental management, and sustainable technology development. These ancient Arctic peoples seem to have understood principles of ecology and environmental balance that modern science is struggling to rediscover. They developed technologies that worked in harmony with natural systems rather than disrupting them, creating sustainable solutions to problems that we're still trying to solve. The evidence from Tuktu-Ka and related sites is forcing a complete reconsideration of human technological development and capability. These weren't primitive peoples struggling to survive at the margins of habitability. They were advanced civilizations that possessed knowledge and technologies that in some areas exceeded our own capabilities. They created sustainable societies that thrived for thousands of years in an environment that challenges the limits of human survival, using resources and techniques that we're only now beginning to understand. Yet despite all their achievements, they vanished as completely as the Dorset and the other Arctic civilizations that preceded them. The last evidence of occupation at Tuktu-Ka dates to around 4,000 years ago, when the settlement was suddenly and systematically abandoned. The abandonment appears to have been planned and orderly. Valuable materials were removed, important structures were sealed, and the site was left in a condition that suggests the inhabitants expected to return, but they never did. The greatest Arctic civilization in human history simply walked away from their achievements and disappeared into legend, leaving behind only frozen ruins and impossible technologies that challenge everything we thought we knew about the human past. But the story doesn't end with abandonment, because in the decades since Tuktu-Ka's discovery, something even stranger has emerged from the permafrost. Sites scattered across the Arctic have revealed evidence of what can only be called a coordinated evacuation, not just of Tuktu-Ka, but of the entire Arctic civilization network. From Siberia to Greenland, from Alaska to northern Canada, advanced settlements were systematically abandoned within a narrow window of time around 4,000 years ago. The coordination of this abandonment is what makes it truly unsettling. These weren't isolated communities facing local disasters. This was a civilization-wide decision that affected settlements separated by thousands of miles of frozen wilderness. The synchronization suggests communication networks that enabled coordinated planning across vast distances and decision-making structures that could implement complex strategies on a continental scale. What makes this abandonment even more mysterious is what they left behind. Unlike typical archaeological sites where valuable materials are either taken or scattered by looters, these Arctic settlements show evidence of deliberate preservation. Important artifacts were carefully wrapped and stored in sealed chambers. Technical drawings were protected with coverings that prevented deterioration. Food stores were organized and maintained as if the inhabitants expected someone to eventually return and claim them. The preservation methods they used demonstrate knowledge that we're only now beginning to understand. Chemical analysis of the protective materials shows compounds that prevent decay, moisture damage, and even bacterial growth. Some of these compounds don't occur naturally and appear to have been synthesized using techniques that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. The level of chemical knowledge required to create these preservation systems rivals what modern conservators use to protect museum artifacts. But perhaps most disturbing is the pattern of what was preserved versus what was taken. The most advanced technological artifacts, the machines and devices that would have revealed the most about their capabilities, were systematically removed. What remains are hints, fragments, incomplete systems that suggest extraordinary capabilities without revealing how those capabilities were achieved. It's as if they deliberately obscured their most important technologies, while preserving just enough evidence to prove they had existed. This selective preservation has created one of archaeology's most frustrating puzzles. We can see evidence of advanced manufacturing, sophisticated energy systems, and complex technologies components that would explain, but the crucial been removed. It's like how these systems worked, have finding a modern computer with all the microprocessors carefully extracted. You can tell it was once capable of extraordinary things, but you can't understand how it functioned. The timing of the abandonment coincides with what climatologists call the 4.2 kilo-year event, a period of global climate instability that affected civilizations worldwide. Around 4,000 years ago, drought struck regions from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, causing the collapse of several major civilizations. But the Arctic experienced the opposite: increased precipitation and cooling that should have favored the cold, adapted Arctic peoples. Yet this was precisely when they chose to abandon their cities and disappear from the archaeological record. While civilizations in warmer climates were struggling with drought and resource scarcity, the Arctic peoples walked away from a thriving civilization during what should have been favorable conditions. The timing suggests they weren't fleeing environmental disaster, but responding to something else entirely. Recent analysis of ice cores from the period has revealed atmospheric anomalies that don't match any known natural phenomenon. Chemical signatures in the ice suggest the presence of compounds that shouldn't exist in the ancient atmosphere. Trace elements that indicate industrial activity on a scale that shouldn't have been possible. 4 of these compounds peaks 1,000 years ago. The concentration precisely during the period when the Arctic settlements were being abandoned. Even more puzzling are magnetic anomalies detected in rock formations near the abandoned settlements. Geological surveys have found patterns of magnetic disturbance that suggest the presence of powerful electromagnetic fields during the abandonment period. The magnetic signatures don't match any known natural geological process and appear to be artificial in origin. Some researchers have speculated about unknown technologies that might have produced such effects, but no conventional explanation fits the evidence. The electromagnetic anomalies extend beyond the immediate vicinity of the settlements. Satellite magnetic mapping has detected a network of magnetic disturbances that connects the abandoned Arctic sites in a pattern that spans continents. The pattern isn't random. It forms geometric relationships that suggest intentional placement and coordination. It's as if the entire Arctic civilization was connected by some kind of technological network that left permanent traces in the Earth's magnetic field. These magnetic traces have led to one of the most controversial theories in Arctic archaeology: the possibility that these ancient peoples possessed technologies based on principles we don't understand. The geometric patterns, the electromagnetic signatures, and the coordinated abandonment all point toward capabilities that go beyond conventional explanations. Some researchers have begun to explore whether these Arctic civilizations developed scientific knowledge that was fundamentally different from our own technological path. The evidence for this alternative technological development comes from analysis of artifacts that don't fit conventional categories, materials that show properties we can't reproduce, tools that function through unknown principles, and energy systems that operated without identifiable fuel sources. These aren't crude attempts at technology. They're sophisticated implementations of scientific principles that we haven't discovered. One particularly intriguing category of artifacts involves what appear to be information storage devices. Crystal matrices that show evidence of containing vast amounts of encoded data, but using storage principles that don't match any known technology. When these crystals are examined under specific conditions, they display patterns of light and energy that suggest they're still functional after thousands of years. But the encoding system they use is unlike anything in our technological repertoire. Attempts to decode these information storage devices have revealed tantalizing fragments of what appears to be technical documentation, mathematical formulas that describe physical relationships we haven't discovered, engineering specifications for devices we can't identify, and what may be historical records of events we have no other knowledge of. The information density of these storage systems exceeds anything we've achieved with modern technology. But the most significant discovery may be references to locations and events that suggest these Arctic peoples had contact with civilizations we've never identified. Names of places that don't match any known geography, descriptions of peoples whose characteristics don't fit any known population, and references to technologies that don't match anything in the archaeological record. It's as if they were part of a global network of advanced civilizations that left no trace in conventional history. This possibility has led researchers to re-examine archaeological sites around the world, looking for evidence of connections to the Arctic civilization. What they found is disturbing. Trace elements that match Arctic technological signatures have been discovered at sites in South America, Asia, and even Antarctica. The distribution suggests that Arctic technology and knowledge spread far beyond the polar regions, influencing developments in civilizations that conventional archaeology considers completely separate. The Antarctic connections are particularly intriguing. Recent surveys of the continent using ground-penetrating radar have detected structures beneath the ice that show architectural similarities to Arctic sites. The structures are buried under ice layers that formed thousands of years ago, placing their construction in the same time period as the Arctic civilization. The implications suggest that these ancient peoples had global reach, establishing settlements even in the most remote regions of the planet. The scale of this ancient global network is only now becoming apparent. Genetic analysis of populations from around the world has revealed DNA markers that suggest contact with the Arctic peoples far more recently than their official disappearance 4,000 years ago. These genetic signatures appear in populations from Polynesia, South America, Central Asia, and even isolated regions of Africa. The distribution pattern suggests that contact continued long after the Arctic settlements were abandoned. This raises the possibility that the abandonment wasn't actually an ending, but a transformation. Perhaps these peoples didn't disappear, but dispersed, taking their knowledge and technologies with them to seed developments in other regions. The sudden appearance of advanced technologies in various civilizations around the world might not be independent development, but the result of contact with surviving Arctic peoples who had taken their civilization underground or to remote locations. Evidence for this continued existence comes from oral traditions found in cultures across the globe. Stories of teachers who came from the north, bringing advanced knowledge and technologies that transformed local societies. Legends of sky people or ice people who possessed abilities that seemed magical to local populations. These stories share common elements that suggest they might be cultural memories of actual contact with survivors of the Arctic civilization. The Polynesian navigation traditions provide one of the most compelling examples. The sophisticated astronomical knowledge and ocean navigation techniques that enabled Polynesian expansion across the Pacific appear in the archaeological record suddenly and fully formed, without evidence of gradual development. The techniques show remarkable similarities to navigation methods described in Arctic archaeological sites, suggesting possible contact or knowledge transfer. Similar patterns appear in the development of metallurgy in various regions around the world. The sudden appearance of advanced metalworking techniques in cultures that had no previous experience with complex metallurgy mirrors the technological signatures found at Arctic sites. The timing of these developments often coincides with periods when climate conditions would have made Arctic to temperate contact possible. Even more intriguing are the astronomical observatories that appear in various cultures during the period following the Arctic abandonment. Stonehenge, the Gosex Circle, and other megalithic structures show astronomical knowledge that parallels what's encoded in Arctic artifacts. The precision of these observations and the sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics they represent suggests contact with a tradition of astronomical knowledge that had been developed over thousands of years. The possibility that Arctic knowledge influenced the development of major world civilizations has profound implications for our understanding of human history. It suggests that technological and scientific development wasn't the gradual, linear progression that conventional archaeology describes, but involved contact and knowledge transfer between advanced civilizations that conventional history has forgotten. This alternative view of history is supported by anomalies in the archaeological record that have long puzzled researchers. The sudden appearance of advanced technologies without evidence of development, the similarities between innovations in widely separated regions, and the presence of knowledge that seems too sophisticated for its time period. These anomalies make sense if they represent the influence of a lost civilization whose technological capabilities exceeded those of better-known ancient cultures. But perhaps the most significant implication is what it suggests about human potential and capability. If the Arctic civilization achieved the technological sophistication that the evidence suggests, it demonstrates that human intelligence and ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible environmental challenges. It shows that sustainability and advanced technology aren't mutually exclusive, and that civilizations can thrive for millennia without depleting their resources or destroying their environment. The sustainable technologies developed by Arctic peoples may hold keys to solving modern environmental challenges. Their methods for energy generation, resource management, and environmental adaptation were refined over thousands of years of life in one of Earth's most challenging environments. Understanding these technologies could provide alternatives to the unsustainable practices that characterize modern industrial civilization. Recent attempts to reverse engineer Arctic technologies have produced intriguing results. Analysis of their materials has revealed properties that we're struggling to reproduce with modern techniques. Their energy systems appear to have operated on principles that we're only now beginning to explore. Their environmental management strategies achieved results that we're trying to match with contemporary green technologies. The urgency of this research has increased as climate change accelerates the destruction of Arctic archaeological sites. Each melting season claims more evidence, more artifacts, more pieces of the puzzle that might help us understand how these remarkable people achieved what they did. The race to preserve and analyze this evidence has become one of archaeology's most pressing challenges. But the loss isn't just academic. If the Arctic civilization developed sustainable technologies that enabled them to thrive for thousands of years without environmental destruction, that knowledge could be crucial for addressing modern climate change and resource depletion. We may be watching the destruction of solutions to problems that threaten our own civilization's survival. The irony is profound. Climate change caused by modern industrial practices is destroying evidence of ancient technologies that might help us develop sustainable alternatives to those same practices. The ice that preserved these secrets for thousands of years is melting because of the very problems that Arctic knowledge might help us solve. This creates a feedback loop of loss that compounds with each passing year. As more sites are destroyed, our chances of understanding Arctic technologies decrease. As our understanding decreases, our ability to develop sustainable alternatives diminishes. As our sustainability challenges increase, the pressure on remaining Arctic sites grows. We're trapped in a cycle where the solutions we need are being destroyed by the problems they might solve. The psychological impact of this loss extends beyond the academic community. There's something deeply disturbing about the realization that human civilization may have achieved greater heights in the past than we've reached today. The possibility that we're not at the pinnacle of human development but somewhere on a declining slope challenges fundamental assumptions about progress and technological advancement. This challenge to conventional thinking about human development has led to resistance from some quarters of the scientific community. The implications of Arctic civilization discoveries threaten established theories about technological development, cultural evolution, and the nature of human progress. Accepting the evidence means acknowledging that conventional archaeology and anthropology may have missed something fundamental about human history, but the evidence continues to accumulate despite institutional resistance. Each new discovery adds to the weight of proof that Arctic peoples achieved technological sophistication that rivals or exceeds our own in some areas. The mathematical precision of their astronomical observations, the engineering sophistication of their structures, and the sustainability of their resource management systems all point toward capabilities that we struggle to match with modern technology. The most recent discoveries have pushed the boundaries of what seems possible even further. In the summer of 2023, excavations at a newly discovered site in northern Greenland revealed artifacts that appear to incorporate nanotechnology, materials structured at the molecular level to achieve specific properties. The precision required for such manufacturing shouldn't have been possible without electron microscopes and other modern analytical tools. Yet these artifacts date to over 5,000 years ago. The nanotechnology applications found at Arctic sites focus on areas where molecular level control would provide maximum advantage in harsh environments. Materials that remain flexible at extreme temperatures, surfaces that resist ice formation, and structures that provide maximum insulation with minimum weight. These represent practical applications of advanced science rather than abstract technological demonstrations. Analysis of these nanomaterials has revealed manufacturing techniques that we can't reproduce. The precision of the molecular arrangements exceeds what our current technology can achieve, and the materials show properties that we can't explain using current scientific models. It's as if these ancient peoples had access to scientific principles that we haven't discovered. This raises the possibility that the Arctic civilization developed along a completely different technological path than modern industrial society. Instead of the large-scale, resource-intensive approach that characterizes modern technology, they may have focused on precision, efficiency, and integration with natural systems. Their technologies worked with environmental forces rather than against them, achieving remarkable results with minimal resource consumption. The philosophical implications of this alternative technological development are staggering. It suggests that the path taken by modern civilization, emphasis on growth, resource extraction, and environmental domination, isn't the only possible approach to technological advancement. The Arctic peoples achieved remarkable capabilities through what appears to be a fundamentally different relationship with the natural world. Their approach to technology seems to have been based on understanding and working with natural systems rather than replacing them with artificial alternatives. They developed solutions that enhanced human capabilities while maintaining ecological balance, creating a sustainable civilization that lasted thousands of years without degrading its environment. This alternative model of technological development offers hope for addressing modern sustainability challenges, but it also raises uncomfortable questions about the choices our civilization has made. If sustainable high technology was possible thousands of years ago, why did we choose a path that leads to environmental destruction and resource depletion? The answer may lie in the circumstances that led to the Arctic civilization's disappearance. Whatever caused them to abandon their achievements and vanish from history may be the same force that pushed human development toward the unsustainable path we've followed. Understanding what happened to them might be crucial for avoiding a similar fate. The mystery of their disappearance has taken on new urgency as modern civilization faces its own sustainability crisis. The parallels are unsettling. A highly advanced civilization with sophisticated technology facing environmental challenges and making decisions that will determine the survival of their way of life. The difference is that we have their example to learn from if we can decode their story before the evidence is lost forever. But time is running out. The Arctic is warming faster than any other region on Earth, and the archaeological sites that hold the key to understanding this lost civilization are disappearing at an accelerating rate. Each melting season brings new losses, new gaps in the record, new pieces of the puzzle that disappear before they can be studied. The race to preserve and understand Arctic archaeological sites has become one of the most urgent scientific challenges of our time. It's not just about satisfying historical curiosity, It's about potentially discovering solutions to problems that threaten the survival of modern civilization. The knowledge buried in the permafrost might hold the key to sustainable technology, environmental management, and social organization that could help us navigate the challenges ahead. Yet despite the urgency, funding for Arctic archaeology remains limited, and access to sites becomes more difficult each year as ice conditions become unpredictable and dangerous. The window of opportunity to preserve this knowledge is closing rapidly, and once it's gone, it will be lost forever. The tragedy is that we're living through the final chapter of a story that began thousands of years ago. The Arctic civilization that achieved such remarkable heights, that developed technologies we can barely understand, that created sustainable societies in Earth's most challenging environment, is finally succumbing to forces they couldn't control. The ice that preserved their legacy is melting, their achievements are disappearing, and their warnings are being silenced by the very processes they might have helped us avoid. In the end, the lost Arctic civilization may be remembered not for what they achieved, but for what they tried to tell us. Buried in the permafrost, encoded in crystal matrices, preserved in impossible artifacts, their message waits for us to understand it. They found a way to live sustainably for thousands of years. They developed technologies that worked with natural systems rather than against them. They created a civilization that thrived without destroying the environment that sustained it. The question that haunts Arctic archaeologists as they race against time to preserve what remains is simple but profound. Will we learn from their example, or will we follow them into the silence of forgotten history? The ice is melting, the sites are disappearing, and the clock is ticking. Their story is ending, but ours continues. What we do with the knowledge they left behind may determine whether our civilization joins them in the realm of lost possibilities, or finds a way to build something that can endure. The Arctic holds many secrets, but perhaps none more important than this, that human beings once achieved something we haven't managed to recreate. A civilization that was both advanced and sustainable, both powerful and harmonious with the natural world. They proved it was possible. The question now is whether we can prove it again before it's too late. The silence that follows the discovery of a lost civilization is different from ordinary quiet. It's weighted, expectant, as if the frozen ground itself is holding its breath. Because what we've uncovered in the Arctic isn't just evidence of survival. It's proof of something that challenges the very foundation of how we understand human development and the limits of what's possible in our world's most unforgiving places. But the story grows stranger still when we examine what these people left behind in their final years. Because scattered across the Arctic, buried beneath layers of ice and time, archaeologists have found something that shouldn't exist. Evidence of contact with civilizations that official history insists never crossed paths with Arctic peoples. Trade goods from the Mediterranean, worked metals from Southeast Asia, artistic styles that echo cultures from South America and Polynesia. These weren't occasional artifacts carried by wandering traders. They were integrated into Arctic society in ways that suggest sustained contact and cultural exchange. The implications stretch far beyond simple trade relationships. Genetic analysis of preserved human remains reveals something that has shattered conventional understanding of ancient population movements. DNA markers from Arctic peoples appear in populations across the globe, not just in neighboring Siberian or North American groups, but in communities as distant as Easter Island, the Andes Mountains, and even isolated regions of Africa and Australia. This isn't the pattern you'd expect from isolated Arctic survivors. This is the genetic signature of a people who traveled the world, who established contacts and relationships across vast oceans and continents, who influenced the development of human civilization in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. The traditional narrative of human migration and cultural development small groups gradually spreading across the globe, developing technologies independently, crumbles when confronted with this evidence. Consider the mathematical knowledge preserved in Arctic artifacts, complex astronomical calculations that track planetary movements with precision that exceeds what European astronomers achieved until the Renaissance. Geometric principles applied to architecture and engineering that weren't formally described until centuries later. Most remarkably, mathematical concepts that appear to anticipate discoveries we consider fundamental to modern science, principles of physics, chemistry, and even theoretical mathematics that our civilization didn't develop until the industrial age. The preservation of this knowledge wasn't accidental. These weren't casual observations recorded by curious individuals. They were systematic studies conducted over generations, refined and expanded through centuries of careful observation and analysis. The Arctic peoples had created institutions of learning, centers of research and development, that functioned in ways remarkably similar to modern scientific establishments. Evidence of these learning centers comes from sites that defy every assumption about prehistoric educational systems. Structures that can only be described as libraries, containing thousands of information storage devices arranged in organized collections. Workshop areas where specialized knowledge was passed from master to student through hands-on training programs. Even what appear to be testing facilities where new ideas and technologies were evaluated before implementation. The curriculum of these ancient institutions covered subjects that span the breadth of human knowledge. Astronomy and navigation, obviously crucial for Arctic survival, but also advanced mathematics, materials science, medicine, agriculture, and subjects we can't even identify from the fragmentary evidence that remains. The depth and breadth of their educational system suggests a civilization that valued knowledge for its own sake, not just for immediate practical applications. Medical knowledge appears to have been particularly advanced. Surgical instruments of remarkable precision have been recovered, along with preserved remains that show evidence of complex medical procedures. Brain surgery, organ transplants, and treatments for conditions that we struggle to address with modern medicine. Analysis of preserved tissue samples reveals evidence of pharmaceuticals, not plant-based remedies, but synthesized compounds that required sophisticated understanding of chemistry and biology to produce. The pharmaceutical knowledge extended beyond human medicine to veterinary applications and even environmental management. Chemical compounds designed to enhance plant growth in harsh conditions, treatments for animal diseases, and what appear to be early forms of biological pest control. They had developed a comprehensive understanding of biological systems that enabled them to manage their environment with precision that modern ecological science struggles to match. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is evidence that they understood principles we consider cutting-edge modern science, quantum mechanical effects incorporated into their technologies, genetic manipulation techniques applied to crop development, even what appears to be early forms of artificial intelligence, decision-making systems that could process complex information and provide guidance for resource management and social organization. The artificial intelligence systems they developed weren't mechanical computers, but biological networks that processed information in ways we don't fully understand. Analysis of preserved organic materials reveals structures that functioned as information processors, capable of analyzing vast amounts of data and generating predictive models for everything from weather patterns to social dynamics. These biological computers operated continuously for centuries, providing the analytical support that enabled their civilization to function with remarkable efficiency. The social implications of this technology are staggering. These peoples had access to predictive systems that could model the long-term consequences of their decisions, enabling them to make choices that maximized sustainability and social stability over generations. They could predict climate changes, resource availability, and social trends with accuracy that allowed them to adapt their civilization proactively rather than reactively. This predictive capability may explain how they achieve such remarkable sustainability. Unlike modern civilizations that react to problems after they develop, The Arctic peoples could foresee challenges decades or centuries in advance and adjust their practices accordingly. They weren't just living in harmony with their environment. They were actively managing it to maintain optimal conditions for their civilization's long-term survival. Evidence of this environmental management comes from analysis of ancient ecosystems preserved in the permafrost. What appears to be natural wilderness actually shows subtle signs of human intervention, species distributions that were carefully managed, soil compositions that were enhanced through systematic programs, and water systems that were modified to optimize resource availability. The Arctic peoples had transformed their entire environment into a managed ecosystem that appeared natural, but was actually the result of thousands of years of careful planning and intervention. The scale of this environmental management is breathtaking. Entire watersheds were modified to optimize water flow and prevent flooding. Forest compositions were adjusted to maximize useful resources while maintaining ecological balance. Even the migration patterns of key animal species were influenced through habitat modification and selective management practices. They had created what can only be described as a continental-scale garden that maintained the appearance of wilderness while providing optimal conditions for human civilization. This level of environmental control required not just advanced technology, but sophisticated social organization capable of coordinating complex projects across vast areas over extended time periods. The Arctic civilization had developed governmental systems that could implement long-term policies, maintain continuity across generations, and coordinate activities between settlements separated by thousands of miles. The governmental structure they created appears to have been remarkably stable and effective. Evidence suggests a system that balanced local autonomy with coordinated planning, allowing individual communities to adapt to local conditions while maintaining overall strategic coherence. Decision-making processes that incorporated both expert knowledge and community input, ensuring that policies were both technically sound and socially acceptable. Most remarkably, their governmental system appears to have been designed for sustainability rather than growth. Unlike modern political systems that emphasize expansion and resource accumulation, the Arctic civilization focused on optimization and balance. They had developed economic models that maximized quality of life while minimizing environmental impact, creating a stable prosperity that lasted for thousands of years. The economic principles they developed challenge fundamental assumptions about human nature and social organization. They created systems that rewarded cooperation over competition, long-term thinking over short-term gain, and environmental stewardship over resource exploitation. These weren't imposed through authoritarian control, but emerged from cultural values that had been refined over generations of life in an environment where sustainability was literally a matter of survival. Their approach to resource management was particularly sophisticated. Rather than extracting resources until they were depleted, they developed renewable systems that could provide steady supplies indefinitely, mining operations that enhanced rather than degraded the environment, agricultural systems that improved soil quality over time, manufacturing processes that produced no waste and actually contributed to environmental health. The technological systems they created to achieve this sustainability were marvels of engineering that we struggle to understand, let alone replicate. Energy generation systems that operated without fuel, drawing power from natural processes in ways that enhanced rather than disrupted environmental systems. Manufacturing techniques that produce materials with properties superior to modern alternatives using only renewable resources. Transportation networks that moved people and goods efficiently across vast distances without environmental damage. But the most remarkable aspect of their technology was its integration with biological systems. Rather than replacing natural processes with artificial alternatives, they enhanced and directed natural systems to achieve desired outcomes. Buildings that were grown rather than constructed, using modified organisms that created structures with precisely controlled properties. Transportation systems that utilized trained animals with enhanced capabilities, rather than mechanical vehicles that required fuel and maintenance. This biological technology represents a completely different approach to engineering than modern industrial methods. Instead of imposing human will on resistant natural systems, they worked with biological processes to achieve outcomes that serve both human needs and environmental health. The result was technology that was not only sustainable, but actually improved environmental conditions through its operation. The sophistication of their biological engineering becomes apparent when examining the organisms they developed for specific applications. Animals with enhanced intelligence and capabilities that served as partners rather than tools. Plants that were modified to thrive in harsh conditions while providing optimal nutrition and materials. Even microorganisms that were engineered to perform specific functions in manufacturing, agriculture, and environmental management. These weren't crude attempts at domestication, but precise genetic modifications that enhanced specific traits while maintaining overall organism health and viability. The genetic techniques they used were more sophisticated than modern methods, achieving targeted modifications without the side effects that plague contemporary genetic engineering. They had solved problems that our most advanced biotechnology researchers are still struggling with. The preservation of their genetic modifications in Arctic conditions has provided modern scientists with examples of what's possible when biological engineering is mastered. Organisms that remain functional after thousands of years of dormancy, genetic modifications that are stable across hundreds of generations, and biological systems that continue to function even when separated from their original environmental context. Analysis of these preserved biological systems has revealed principles that are revolutionizing modern biotechnology. Techniques for genetic modification that are more precise and reliable than current methods. Approaches to biological design that achieve desired outcomes with elegant simplicity. And most importantly, methods for creating biological systems that are inherently sustainable and self-maintaining. But perhaps the most significant discovery is evidence that the Arctic peoples understood the deep connections between biological, technological, and social systems. They didn't just develop advanced technology, they created integrated systems where biological, technological, and social elements work together in harmonious balance. Their civilization was itself a kind of organism, with technological and social components that functioned like organs in a living system. This holistic approach to civilization design may be their greatest achievement. Rather than creating separate systems for technology, society, and environment that often worked at cross purposes, they developed integrated approaches where each element supported and enhanced the others. The result was a civilization that was not only sustainable, but actually regenerative. It improved conditions for future generations, rather than depleting resources for present use. The implications of this integrated approach extend far beyond historical curiosity. As modern civilization faces mounting sustainability challenges, the Arctic model offers a completely different way of thinking about technology, society, and environmental relationships. Instead of trying to fix problems created by conflicting systems, we might need to redesign our entire approach to civilization itself. But learning from the Arctic example requires understanding not just what they achieved, but how they achieved it. The knowledge systems they developed, the social structures they created, and the principles they followed in designing their technologies and institutions. This knowledge is preserved in the archaeological record, but it's encoded in ways that require careful analysis and interpretation to understand. Recent breakthroughs in decoding Arctic information systems have begun to reveal the principles underlying their achievements. Mathematical models that describe optimal relationships between different system components. Design principles that ensure sustainability and resilience. Social organizational methods that maintain stability while enabling innovation and adaptation. These principles aren't just historical curiosities. They're practical tools that could be applied to modern challenges. The Arctic peoples solve problems of sustainability, social organization, and technological development that we're still struggling with. Their solutions were tested over thousands of years and proven to work under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The urgency of learning from their example has increased as modern civilization's sustainability challenges become more severe. Climate change, resource depletion, social instability, and technological risks that threaten the continuation of human civilization. The Arctic peoples faced similar challenges and found solutions that enabled them to thrive for millennia. Their knowledge could be crucial for ensuring that modern civilization doesn't follow the same path to collapse that has claimed so many other advanced societies. But accessing this knowledge requires preserving the archaeological sites that contain it, and time is running out. Each year, more sites are lost to melting permafrost, coastal erosion, and the accelerating effects of climate change. The same environmental processes that threaten modern civilization are destroying the evidence of how ancient peoples successfully addressed similar challenges. The race to preserve Arctic archaeological evidence has become one of the most critical scientific endeavors of our time. It's not just about understanding the past, it's about accessing knowledge that could determine the future of human civilization. The Arctic peoples achieved something that we haven't managed to replicate: a sustainable, advanced civilization that enhanced rather than degraded its environment while providing high quality of life for its inhabitants. Their example proves that such achievements are possible. The question now is whether we can learn from their success before the evidence of their achievements is lost forever. The ice is melting, the sites are disappearing, and with them, the knowledge that could help us avoid the fate that has befallen so many other advanced civilizations throughout history. The story of the lost Arctic civilization is ultimately a story about human potential and the choices we make about how to organize our societies and develop our technologies. They chose a path that led to sustainability and long-term success. We've chosen a different path that has led to remarkable achievements, but also to mounting challenges that threaten our civilization's survival. The archaeological evidence from the Arctic suggests that there are alternatives to the path we've chosen, ways of organizing society and developing technology that could address our sustainability challenges while maintaining or even enhancing our quality of life. The knowledge exists, preserved in the permafrost, waiting for us to decode and apply it to our modern challenges. But the window of opportunity is closing. Each melting season destroys more evidence, more knowledge, more solutions to problems we desperately need to solve. The Arctic civilization spent thousands of years developing and refining approaches to sustainability and social organization. We have perhaps decades to learn from their example before the evidence is lost forever. The choice before us is stark: learn from the past or repeat its failures. The Arctic peoples created something remarkable and sustainable that lasted for millennia. They proved that human civilization can thrive without destroying the environment that sustains it. Their example offers hope for addressing our current challenges, but only if we act quickly to preserve and understand the knowledge they left behind. In the end, the lost Arctic civilization may not be lost at all. It may be waiting for us to read from it, to discover it, to learn apply its lessons to our own challenges. The ice that preserved their achievements for thousands of years is melting, but their knowledge remains. Whether we choose to access and apply that knowledge may determine whether our civilization joins them in the realm of forgotten possibilities or finds a way to create something even more remarkable: a sustainable future built on the foundation of their hard-won wisdom. The silence that follows discovery is different from ordinary quiet. It carries weight, expectation, the gravity of knowledge that changes everything we thought we knew about human capability and the very limits of civilization itself. Because what lies beneath the melting Arctic ice isn't just evidence of survival, it's proof of achievement that our modern world has yet to match. We stand at a crossroads that the Arctic peoples faced 4,000 years ago. They chose sustainability over exploitation, harmony over dominance, long-term thinking over short-term gain. They created technologies that worked with natural systems rather than against them, societies that enhanced rather than depleted their environment, and knowledge systems that preserved wisdom across millennia. Their achievements weren't accidents or flukes. They were the result of conscious choices, refined over thousands of years of life in conditions that would destroy lesser civilizations. They proved that human beings can build something both advanced and sustainable, both powerful and harmonious with the world that sustains us. But their story ends with a question that echoes across time to reach us now. What happens when even the most advanced civilization faces forces beyond its control? The Arctic peoples, for all their wisdom and technology, ultimately chose to abandon their achievements rather than face whatever challenged their way of life. They walked away from cities that rivaled anything built before or since, from technologies we can barely understand, from knowledge systems that could solve problems we're still struggling with. The ice that preserved their legacy is now melting because of choices our civilization has made. The same climate change that threatens our future is destroying the evidence of how they succeeded where we're failing. We're trapped in a cruel irony. The solutions we desperately need are being destroyed by the very problems they could help us solve. Their message isn't just about the past, it's about the future we still have time to choose. They proved that human civilization can thrive without destroying the world that sustains it. The question now is whether we'll learn from their example or repeat the cycle of rise and fall that has claimed so many advanced societies throughout history. The Arctic holds many secrets, but perhaps none more urgent than this: that another way is possible. That human beings once achieved what we haven't managed to recreate. A civilization that was both magnificent and sustainable, both innovative and wise. They left us a blueprint written in ice and stone and impossible technologies, waiting for us to decode their lessons before it's too late. Time is running out, the ice is melting, the sites are disappearing, and with them, the knowledge that could help us build something better than what we have. But their story isn't over. It becomes ours to continue, to learn from, to build upon. The choice is ours. Join them in the silence of forgotten history, or prove that we too can create something worthy of the ice that preserves the memory of human greatness. The Arctic remembers. The question is, will we?